Good morning, everybody. I would like to start with the land acknowledgement, which we always do at York. It's very important that we acknowledge the land that we're on, and particularly when thinking about a practice such as planning, which is so tied to the land and the use of the land. It's incredibly important that we reflect on where the land comes from and whose land it is. So I'm going to use the land acknowledgement for the City of Toronto, which is where I am. But of course, I invite you to reflect on the land where you're located and the appropriate acknowledgement there. So we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So I would like to welcome you all this morning and to offer a few thanks and to provide a brief introduction to the new faculty that we are all now associated with. My thanks, first of all, to MYPAC for offering this great experiential education opportunity for our students. I know that a lot of hard work has gone into this. It's the first time, I believe, that a case competition has been organized. And it's taken a lot of work from Brandon Stevens, who you've just heard from, and Patricia Jankowski, who was just on your screen, who've put a lot of creativity, determination and effort into making this event happen. There was no template for this, so they've really built this from the ground up. So thank you to Brandon and Patty for that. Thank you also from in-house. Thank you to Joanne Hui and Jen Ferdinand. Joanne is with the Central Alumni Office at York. Jen is the Alumni Coordinator for the Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change. They've done a great deal of work as well. I was mentioning earlier that I was getting emails very late at night from Jen and very early this morning. So I'm not sure she slept, but she claims that she did. So thank you to them as well for all the work that they have put into this event. And thank you to our judges. We have two judges with us this morning, Anand Balaram and Andrea Oliveira, who are joining us from the city of Brampton. And this afternoon, we'll be joined by David McMillan from the City of Toronto and Sabrina Coletti from WSP. So we're really grateful to all of our judges and to Anand and Andrea, who are with us this morning, for making time for this. It's an incredibly important opportunity for our students to learn from your expertise, and we're very grateful. Now, I would like to say just a few words about the new faculty that we're all part of, and I believe that we're going to show you a trailer video that's been created to boost us all up. Joanne, can we cue that? I always get such a kick when I see that video. Exactly what we need at 8:30 in the morning. So just to tell you a little bit about the new faculty, those of you who are graduates of the MES program will have known it as the Faculty of Environmental Studies. What has happened within the last few months, but as the culmination of many years of planning, is that FES has come together with the Department of Geography and with other scholars from the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies to create a new faculty, the Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change. And this is a really exciting development. It's increased the critical mass of scholars in this new faculty. And as the name suggests, has really put urban issues at the forefront of what the faculty does. Urban issues always were, of course, an important part of FES, with the MES planning program in particular. But this has created a much larger critical mass of scholars in the urban area and a specific undergraduate program in urban studies. And it really has brought together a collection of researchers who are probably the largest collection of urban scholars in the country in a single academic unit. So it's a very exciting time for urban studies and urban scholarship at York. It's a faculty that is really emphasizing community engagement and policy engagement. We have change in our name for a reason. It's not just change that we study, it's change that we try to effect as well. And so engagement with policy is a core theme of the faculty, and engagement with the communities around us is a core theme. And so the event today is really on message, so to speak, for what the new faculty is trying to do. And then another key element of the new faculty is experiential learning, like really making sure that our students are experiencing the world that they will be going into in the classroom and outside of the classroom, ensuring that they're encountering professionals in their field and learning the ropes of what they will do in the workplace before they get there. So today's event, as an experiential learning event where you're working through a case and getting feedback from professional planners, is an incredibly important part of that goal for us. So I just want to thank again everybody that's been involved in the organization today, and to wish the very best of luck to all of our teams of students who will keep competing for lavish cash prizes, I understand, but more importantly, will have a really great learning experience working together and working with the planning judges who will provide feedback later on. So all the best, everybody. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. I feel very inspired after watching that video as well. I don't think I'll be returning to school, but I'd be excited if I was starting for sure. Joanne, if we could flip over to the housekeeping, perfect. So just go over some housekeeping items. We are on Zoom, and so we'd ask that you mute your microphones if you're not speaking. Use the participant tabs to raise your hand to ask a question. And you can also use the chat box to communicate with us. You can do it privately or blast to all of us. During the presentations later in the day, you'll be given co-host privileges, so you'll be able to advance your own slides. And today's event is being recorded. If you have any concerns, you can reach out to Joanne. And maybe one more housekeeping item. If you'd like to keep your camera off while you're not speaking if you have internet issues, that's totally fine. We can work with that. Hopefully during the presentations, we'll be able to see your faces. That would be great.
Thank you. So I'm going to quickly go over the agenda for the day, just to give you a little understanding of what to expect today. Thank you to the Associate Dean for those opening remarks. Up next, we're going to have the client presentation, and that's from Anand and Andrea, who are client representatives from the City of Brampton. This is where the case itself is going to be announced that you'll be working on today, and that'll be followed by an opportunity for you to ask them questions about the case. Followed by that, the competition itself is going to begin, At that point, you're going to be moved into a breakout room with your team to work on creating your vision for the subject site and creating a PowerPoint to present that vision. From 11 to 11:30, you'll have an opportunity to ask the client representatives from the City of Brampton questions about the case. I will note that this is optional, but we highly encourage it as a good opportunity to better understand the case. One other thing I would note is that the groups can send a representative. You don't need to send all 4 students. From 12 to 1, we have an opportunity for lunch, but you're more than welcome to work through that period to maximize the time for your project. At 3:30 is the presentation submission deadline. And this is where you're going to use the link that was in the student information sheet that was emailed to you yesterday. Please let us know if you don't have that link, because it's very important that we get the presentations so that we can load them into the PowerPoint for presentations, which will begin at 3:45. At that point, we're going to introduce all 4 of our judges, and then you will have exactly 7 minutes for your presentation, and then there will be 3 minutes following that for questions from the judges and from the other participants. Following that, we're going to give the judges a period of time to deliberate and to choose the winning team today. Followed by that, our judges are going to announce the winning team, and then we're going to have some quick closing remarks.
Perfect. So I want to introduce Andrea and Anand. Andrea is a project manager in the Transportation Policy Office at the City of Brampton, and Anand is a senior policy planner in the Land Use Planning Department at the City of Brampton. And Anand, I'll let you take it away if you'd like to introduce the case today.
Sure, thank you. So hi everyone, as Patricia mentioned, my name is Anand Bauram. I'm a senior policy planner at the City of Brampton, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about Bramley Go. If we can go to the next slide. Before we actually jump into the study area, I just want to briefly talk to you guys about the City of Brampton for those of you who may be unfamiliar. The City of Brampton is actually Canada's 9th largest city, and it's the 4th largest in all of the GTA. There is a significant population within the City of Brampton. To date, we average approximately 600,000 residents, and by 2041, that population is expected to grow to approximately 1 million people. Brampton has the 2nd highest growth rate in all of Canada, which is pretty alarming considering that we are just a suburban municipality of the City of Toronto. And overall, 52% of all Brampton residents were born outside of Canada. So when you think about what that means from a planning perspective, it means that we are planning for not a homogeneous community. We're very diverse, with a majority of our population coming from Southeast Asia, so India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, but we also have a large diaspora of people that come from Portugal, Italy, the Philippines, Vietnam, as well as the Caribbean. Next slide. So I also just want to frame Brampton for you in terms of how Brampton operates within the Greater Toronto region. So Brampton is located north of Mississauga, east of Halton Hills, south of Caledon, and west of Vaughan and the City of Toronto. When you think of what Toronto really means and how it impacts Brampton, the largest driver is really the Toronto Pearson International Airport, which is located in Mississauga, just south of Brampton. And if you look at this map, it's really that giant blue blob that encompasses a large portion of Mississauga and Brampton. And that airport megazone really means that there's a lot of employment opportunity within this area to support that airport. And often the case, that employment uses is really large-scale manufacturing or warehousing to deliver goods and support the logistics industry that gets food and goods to our stores for consumer purchase. Regionally, we also have other significant regional connections, like the GO line, which we will be discussing today. The GO line not only connects us to the City of Toronto's Union Station, but it also connects us to Waterloo. And the province of Ontario has kind of decided that this corridor would be the Toronto-Waterloo Innovation Corridor, meaning that stops along it should support this tech and innovation type industry to really promote Toronto as promote this corridor as the Silicon Valley of the North, which is really interesting. There are other connections into Vaughan that connect to the TTC, which are also very significant. But of course, today we are going to be kind of solely speaking about the GO station. Next slide. So from a planning history perspective, Brampton has a very complicated past. If any of you guys have been to Brampton, you probably see some of the good and some of the bad, all of which are lessons to be learned in the planning profession and really guide how we plan today in terms of what not to do oftentimes. So Brampton has been very developer friendly. We've oftentimes just said yes to development just for the sake of development, kind of omitting progress along the way. As a result of that, what we have is a very suburban condition and very stable residential areas that are very hard to transition out. And as a result, we don't really have any distinct urban centers. We don't have a lot of economic activity outside of warehousing and logistics, which is really the crux of our economic base. And a lot of this is really due to an outdated policy context. Our official plan, which is essentially the Bible for any municipality that really guides how infrastructure is supposed to be developed, how the built form is supposed to come about, and how growth is supposed to be allocated. It's really outdated in our case. It was last updated in 2006 with consolidations here and there. And consolidations essentially mean we're addressing LPAT or OMB settlements along the way, so the policy has to be updated. So from that perspective, we're not really dealing with a very strategic policy document that really outlines what we want for the city of Brampton. Next slide. As a result of that kind of chaotic and haphazard planning past, our previous council directed staff to develop a vision for what we wanted the city to be. This vision was a highly collaborative process. We spoke to many residents, and as I mentioned before, Brampton has 52% of our residents who are born outside of Canada. And if you can imagine, or if you have friends or family who are new immigrants, you'll know that their primary goal in being in Canada is not necessarily to participate in government. It's to provide a better life for their family or their kids, whatever the case may be. So oftentimes we have a situation where not all of our residents participate in these more strategic planning initiatives, and we have a planning regime that only fits one group of people and not all. So we wanted this to be very different and very collaborative. So we spoke to approximately 15,000 people in developing this document. We ensured that we had representation from every group to really make sure this was true to the document. But to address all of the planning issues, there were 7 themes identified, from environment and sustainability, ensuring that we were using appropriate energy systems, being respectful to the natural heritage, identifying opportunities for intensification, so identifying strategic centers for growth, understanding how new neighborhoods should be developed, and how old neighborhoods should be retrofitted to represent modern day planning principles. For those of you who have been to Brampton, you'll probably know that transportation issues are pretty high in the city of Brampton, from from accidents to traffic congestion. So transportation is fairly significant, but also recognizing that Brampton cannot just be for the car anymore. We have to rely on transit and active modes a little bit more. And how do they share that space on that road together? From social matters and housing, sorry, I'm getting a message that my sound is going on and off. So I'm just going to turn off my video to make sure that you guys are hearing me. Just let me know if you can't hear me more going forward. From a social matters and housing perspective, housing affordability, I think, is an issue across the Greater Toronto area. The average housing price in Brampton, I think, is anywhere between $700,000 to $900,000, and that is for a single-family home, which is incredibly expensive. So the idea around this is to ensure that there are different typologies. So whether it be low-rise, medium-rise, or high-rise buildings or structures to accommodate different affordability needs, but also different tenures of building, meaning it can be freehold, meaning that you can just buy it, or it can be condo, which means you buy it in association with a whole bunch of other people and you're expected to pay fees, or it can be a rental apartment, meaning that you can rent a unit and just obviously live there. On the other end of the spectrum, the city of Brampton and at the larger region of Peel experiences some of the highest poverty rates in the Greater Toronto area, and there is quite a large homeless population. And as planners, we have to be mindful of not exacerbating the experience of people in the areas that we are planning, but try to also ensure that we're making the adequate provisions for these people as we move through the planning processes, because the worst case scenario, we would be displacing people. And I don't think that in any way is our goal or our mandate. From a health perspective, Brampton has the highest rates of heart disease and diabetes, which is pretty sad, but is largely indicative of how we built our built environment thus far. Our built environment, like I said, really supports the use of the car and not really active modes of transportation. So that's one thing that we do want to promote, is health in the built environment. And of course, arts and culture, we want to make sure there are provisions for artistic expression and exhibit space within all of our areas to really make sure our residents have the opportunity to express themselves in whatever form or fashion. Next slide. So this is just an artist's rendering of the potential city structure for the city of Brampton. As I mentioned, there are distinct areas of growth envisioned for the city of Brampton. There are 3 urban centers, a downtown area, uptown, which is a new area, as well as Bramley City Center. In addition to that, there are 5 town centers, which are intended to support not the highest intensity of growth, but a lesser intensity than what you would imagine like a downtown Toronto. But these areas would also provide amenity space as well as opportunities for jobs and leisure. So I think that's the critical role of these town centers. And the Bramley Go area is one of the identified 5 town centers from the Brampton 2040 vision. Next slide. So this is really just a satellite image from Google Maps about Bramley Go and the area that you guys will be dealing with today. As you can see, it is very heavily manufacturing, logistics, warehousing surrounding the GO station. And this is largely because of the historic land use patterns, but also because there is a highway to the south. So you can see the express toll route, which is Highway 407. That is actually to the south of Bramley GO station, despite the orientation of the image. And according to the growth plan, these are appropriate uses for this area. So this area is in a lot of conflict, one, because of the historic land use patterns that exist, but also because this area is within a provincially significant employment zone, which I believe I will be speaking to a little bit later. And as you can imagine from the vision, this area is anticipated to grow very differently in the future. Next slide. So this is what I was mentioning in that previous slide. There's different policy contexts that I think are operating within this area that make it kind of challenging to plan. So you'll notice as you move through this exercise that there is really no right answer for planning the Bramley-Go area just because of how conflicted the policy is. So Bramley-Go, because it is a GO station that provides regional mobility, it can be considered a major transit station area. So these major transit station areas typically provide a density quotient of 150 residents and jobs combined per hectare and up depending on the type of service that's being provided. In this case, it would be 150 residents and jobs combined per hectare for a GO site. So you guys are probably wondering what this means. And I'll be honest, a lot of planners do not know what this means and cannot speak densities, and that's perfectly fine. I think for the purposes of this exercise, just know that this is a medium to high density. So think of mid-rise buildings to high-rise buildings. If you're in that ball game, you're probably correct. When development applications do come into the city, they don't deny them if they are above 150 residents combined. That is just a minimum density target. From the perspective of the provincially significant employment zones, essentially what this means is these are areas that have regional significance and the province wants to protect it from any conversions. So as I mentioned in the earlier slide, this area is very close to the Toronto Pearson Airport. And as a result, it does supply a larger supply chain, which makes all of these logistics and warehousing uses, manufacturing uses fairly significant at a regional level. However, in a recent proposed amendment to the growth plan, the province has identified that MTSAs can occur within provincially significant employment zones so long as they get the minister's approval, which means that the City of Brampton can move forward in planning an MTSA with densities as well as non-employment uses in the future, which is incredibly exciting considering all of the other great things that are happening at a regional level. For example, the Toronto-Waterloo Innovation Corridor. Next slide. So the issues. I've probably mentioned many of the issues going through this presentation, but I think the most critical issue is how we develop a major transit station area within this context, recognizing all of the employment uses that currently exist within this area. How do you transition from those employment uses to make a walkable, vibrant, transit-oriented community? How do you go about diversifying the economic base? And what that means essentially is right now it's very manufacturing, logistics, warehousing. How do you inspire the tech industry or the creative industry to come to this area and really be successful in positioning themselves within the Bramley-Go MTSA area? How do we really maximize our potential on the Toronto-Waterloo Innovation Corridor? And from a transportation perspective, how do we ensure that connectivity is not lost? How do we ensure that the transportation network that is existing and proposed is not compromised by the densities that potentially can be proposed in this area? And how do we go about dealing with the fact that Steeles Avenue corridor is a logistics corridor, and its purpose is really to move 18-wheelers and trucks to support that supply chain? From an environmental perspective, how do we ensure that the environment is not negatively impacted? And if you are adding a significant amount of people and jobs to this area, how do we ensure that there is an adequate provision of parks and parks or amenity space associated with individual buildings? And I guess ultimately, how do you deal with contextual issues with the MTSA being situated within a heavily stable employment area? And how do you transition the uses to make sure that there is compatibility amongst what is being proposed and what the existing context is? Next slide. So ultimately, your task is to develop a land use plan or a concept plan for the Bramley-Go area, demonstrating environmental, social, and economic sustainability. Throughout your plan, you should really consider what your opportunities and constraints are. So what areas may prohibit development, what areas are opportunities that can really make development more advantageous. And I think this opportunities and constraints will really help you in defining your study area, which you do have liberty to do. I believe in your reference package, there is a delineated boundary that the Region of Peel has come up with for this area, but feel free to deviate from that if you feel like there's a better opportunity to expand or decrease the study area. But typically MTSAs are within 800-meter catchment of the station area, so keep that in mind as well. From a transportation perspective, feel free to add roads or routes to the network if you feel fit. You are able to change and create change. Oftentimes, policy initiatives such as this would happen over a significant amount of time, so don't be afraid of shaking things up in terms of transportation perspective. Parks and open space, try to highlight where parks should go and what their role and function within your overall concept plan is, and how that contributes to the overall green space network within the area. Also identify massing and built form. So try to outline where your buildings are proposed to really demonstrate to us which buildings are coming down, as well as what buildings are being proposed, but also let us know how many stories those are going to be. I don't think we're expecting anything very sophisticated, but if you do want to put the building footprints on a map and then just highlight the number of stories with a number inside of them, I think that would be sufficient. And then of course, precedent images ultimately conveying your intended vision would be really helpful. And precedent images, for those who are unfamiliar with that term, is just example images. So anything that really inspires you or you want to take inspiration from to really convey your intended vision. We want you to demonstrate your understanding of the context and the local issues, not only for the Bramley-Go area, but for Brampton as a whole, because a lot of these issues are pervasive. But we also want you to create a presentation of your land use vision for the Bramley-Go station area, and that will be heard later today. Next slide. This is a land use map that we have prepared for you guys as a reference for your area. As I mentioned, MTSAs are typically 800 meters away from the area. So we've already imposed that, and that's what that red circle is. But understanding that this area is already pretty stable, you do have the opportunity to identify your own study limits. I personally would recommend going off of the constraints of the area, or what you perceive as constraints to your study limits, because planning on those constraints can be challenging or difficult. But also, I would recommend using property lines to also help you delineate where your study limits are, because in planning reality, we have to respect property rights and the rights of individual owners. So just keep that in mind as you're moving through this exercise and trying to determine what your study area should be. And I believe that is my last slide. So any questions, happy to answer.
And then thank you so much for sharing all that information and for taking time to put together that presentation. I really appreciate it. I just want to open the floor quickly, as you said, for questions, if anyone has any. There's two ways to do it. One is by clicking the raise your hand button, and you can do that by clicking on the participants tab, and that will be the option to raise your hand. The second option is just to put it in the chat. And I'm more than happy to read out those questions if that's more comfortable. Let's see. Don't go all at once, everyone. One at a time, one at a time.
Realizing it's early in the morning too. I hope everyone received the maps and the Peel region delineation. You can find it in the email that I just sent during the presentation. If you didn't get it, please send me a message and I can get it to you.
Awesome. Aaron Foster, you have a question?
Sorry. Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any like rail corridor or airport vicinity protection, like restrictions that we should be aware of.
Yes, so typically, I believe there's a 30-meter buffer from the rail corridor for residential uses. You are able to strata develop though, so you can put like employment uses on bottom floors within that area, and then the upper stories develop as residential. But the idea is to put residential within 30 meters of the corridor. And there are height restrictions for the Toronto Pearson International Airport. This area is within that zone. There is reference policy contained within the reference sheet provided. So just look through the official plan. It'll be fairly obvious for that. You'll know how high not to go.
Yeah, I can confirm it's a 30-meter setback from the rail corridor. But yeah, like Anand said, residential uses are sensitive. You can propose other uses and they would be subject to whoever owns the rail corridor, whether they allow it or not. But yeah, 30 meters is the setback.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Sebastian, you have a question?
No, it was answered. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Are there any more questions? I am mindful that we're running a little behind schedule and I want to make sure we give you enough time to work on the project. If there aren't any more questions, I'm going to pass it over to Patty really quickly.
Wait. Is everyone clear on the tasks? If anyone needs clarification over the tasks, don't be afraid to ask. This is the moment. Or any concepts that are new. So there's a lot of first-year students for whom a lot of this is new. It's fine to ask away, whatever wasn't clear. Okay, Justin has a question.
Justin, go ahead.
Hi there, good morning everyone. I was just curious, are there any, I know some of it is kind of covered in the plan documents, but are there any relevant kind of major developments ongoing that have already been approved? So for example, any like new transportation expansions or other big developments that we should be aware of that are kind of already baked in for this area?
So, sorry, excuse me. I think the most recent development within this area would have been actually on the Metrolinx lens. They are developing a structured parking building within the area. I think Metrolinx has the intention for a lot of the stations for them to transition to be walk up rather than park and ride type stations. So that's also something to be mindful of. It might be challenging given the context of this being very, very suburban, commuter-friendly Brampton. But I think ultimately for a lot of the MTSAs, the idea is to allow that critical mass of residents and jobs so that people can just walk to the station and get to where they need to be. So just keep that in mind overall. I wouldn't be too stressed if you are proposing something that deviates from, I guess, what the city or the region or even what Metrolinx intend. Exercise. We want you to think creatively and outside of the box, and bring new ideas to crazy problems.
Did you hear him okay, Justin? And Ed, your mic was a little quiet on that response. Okay, cool. We have a thumbs up. There's also a question in the chat, Brandon. I don't know if you have it open.
Perfect. So yes, Ahmed asked, just so if everyone can know what the question is, whether the only deliverable is a PowerPoint presentation, and that is your only deliverable today, is the presentation that you're going to be doing at 3:45 today.
So yeah. Yes, I suppose that is your ultimate deliverable. My recommendation for you guys would be to create individual maps that really talk to the various areas that we've asked you to. So if it's transportation, create a map that really helps us understand how you're creating a transportation network to accommodate the various modes of transportation. If it's land use, create a land use map that clearly identifies land uses. If it's the building footprints, try to show your massing separately, and then have one map that brings everything together so you can see it all as one. But from a process perspective, I think it would be helpful to visual maps together. Feel free to deviate.
Sorry, Anand, it's really hard to hear you. I don't know if you can move closer to the mic or not. You're really, really quiet. No.
The computer. No. Okay, I'm just gonna type it.
Okay. Sorry, going back, Justin, to your question about the development in the area, I think ultimately, yes, there's some improvements coming to the station, but you can be pretty creative with the lands and the surrounding area. So yeah, don't worry about that. Louisa, did you have anything to add with the creation of the maps or?
Because this year we're doing this remotely, so yeah, there's no need for sophisticated use of software. If you have access to software, that's okay, but if not, use Google Maps or the maps that you were provided and just annotate on top if that's easier. So yeah, that would be okay. I don't know if Anand want to ask creating.
Yeah, I think you'd be shocked how many times in like professional presentations you see Google Maps or like Google Street View screen grabs all the time. If you need to know what's happening in the location, there's so many times when people just go to Google Street View, so that's totally allowed. Yeah, no need for sophisticated software or anything.
No need to overcomplicate it.
Yeah, as long as your vision comes through, that's what we want to see.
Let's see here. Abdul is asking in the chat if they can have a shapefile of land use. I'm not even sure what a shapefile is, to be honest.
No, you cannot.
I think that's all the questions, unless I've missed any. Patty, did I miss any in the chat, or anyone having their hand up?
Did Justin have his hand up?
Sorry?
Oh, sorry, I just forgot to put it down.
Okay.
Patty, can we go back to the tasks slide?
Yeah, Joanne, I think you're the owner.
Yeah, just give me 1 second to.
And are you okay if I send the PowerPoint to the students?
Absolutely.
Great.
So if we can have the slide of the tasks, and if students can please revise to understand what is it that is required, and ask if you need clarification of any of the tasks.
Can you see the slide, everyone?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Did the students receive any specifications for their presentation, like how long or number of slides, or that's up to?
So the restriction is a time limit of 7 minutes. There is no restriction beyond that on a specific number of slides, though. So I will say that if throughout the morning you develop more questions, I think a really important time throughout the day is the question and answer period from 11 to 11:30 as you're starting to think about it and more questions come to mind. Feel free to also email us. Our contact information is in the student welcome package that was emailed yesterday. If you have questions throughout the day, and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. But being mindful of time, and it sounds like there aren't any more questions right now, I am going to pass it back over to Patty.
Yeah, I think if there are no more questions, I'm just looking at the chat. Okay, so Sebastian, your question was answered with the spatial extent of the plan, so the 800 meters, and also the, hopefully you got the maps that I sent, and you'll see the Peel Region MTSA delineation. That's sort of like, you can use that, but you can also see if you want to expand it in any other way within that 800 meters. Yeah, there you go. And makes a good point. Recommend identifying your opportunities and constraints, using the constraints and parcel boundaries to guide you. So if you see an opportunity somewhere that would make a good planning opportunity, then you can include it into your MTSA boundary and plan for within it. Yeah, if there are no more questions, then I think Joanne can put you into your breakout groups. Like Brandon said, you can email both of us. Put Joanne's contact as well if you're having Zoom issues. Yeah, I hope we have given you enough resources and you can begin. Who provided us the case this morning? So I just want to remind the teams that you have exactly 7 minutes, and then we have 3 minutes for the judges to ask you any questions after. At the 1 minute mark, Joanne will message you to warn you that you have 1 minute to finish. And then if you do reach the 7 minutes, we'll just ask you to finish up your last thought, and that will be it. So hopefully we can keep in that order, and I'll just pass it off to Brandon, who can tell you the order of the presentations. Brandon, you're on mute. Brandon, you're still muted. There we go.
2020 Zoom problems, folks. Not to overcomplicate things, group 1 is going to go first, followed by group 2, 3, 4, and 5.
All right, so let's hand it over to, I believe, Jen, you have the presentation for group 1. Just give you a moment there to bring it up. Excellent. Jen, are you able to allow them to take over the screen, or will you flip slides?
Actually, I'm wondering if my group mates are still in the breakout room. I don't see them in the participants.
I saw that they're in there, so I'm just closing all the rooms right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Shavi.
Sorry about that.
And I will advance the slides, Shavi, and your group members, you can just flag me and then I will move through them.
Okay.
So everybody should be in the main room now. Aaron and Justin, are you here?
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so we can.
So we should be able to.
I think Jen will advance the slides for you.
Okay, perfect.
So just give her a cue.
All right.
Thanks in advance, Jen.
Oh, sorry. All right, so are we good to start?
Yeah, Joanne, are you ready to time?
I am.
Great, perfect. Let's go.
All right, so this is our presentation on the Bramley Go Community Hub vision for 2050. We can go to the next slide. So we'll go through the current land uses and the context of the site, our proposal, and building on the vision, the 2040 vision, some greenway corridors, employment centers, complete streets, transit connectivity, housing and mixed use development, our community go center, and some concluding remarks. And can go to the next slide. Awesome. So this is the context of the site. It's sort of in the south side of Brampton. As you can see in the sort of inset that's been made bigger here, it's predominantly industrial area. It has a clearly delineated business corridor with a central office development, which is indicated by the pink area there in the middle. So it's a pretty sort of linear set of land uses. If you go to the next slide, we'll see sort of context of the area. So lots of wide streets, sort of single area buildings, or sorry, single level buildings, lots of automotive oriented design, not a lot of connectivity for active modes of transportation like pedestrians, cycling. It's disconnected from sort of the vibrancy of the rest of the city. And doesn't really connect with all of the land uses that are sort of surrounding it. If you go to the next slide. Oh, it's got a little bit blurry. So this is our land use plan for the area. So you can see that we've included some mid-density areas around the north side sort of the site to sort of introduce a transition into a higher density area, which is indicated by the pink areas there. And then transitioning to office and retail in the rail corridor buffer zone, as well as some yellow commercial sites. We really wanted to promote greenway connectivity. So we've highlighted the areas where there's existing green space, but also where we'd like to increase green space in the future. And then we've also included some teal areas of industrial use, sort of keeping in mind that that was the area's predominant use so far, and that likely it will continue into the future. So some of the things that aren't shown here because they were sort of out of the bounds is that to the east and the west of the areas, we thought that more office space, high density office space, and sort of non-residential commercial uses could be integrated to sort of give way to the existing industrial areas that are surrounding this vibrant, dense space that we've created. The same as that's what we tried to do with the mid-density housing around the edge and around the green space that you can kind of see in towards the middle of the site where the very blurry little GO station is there. We also thought that policy supporting laneway housing or backyard suites and secondary suites to increase density in the surrounding low density residential areas would also be a way to sort of highlight and complement the area that we've sort of planned. So I think we can go to the next slide.
All right. Thank you, Erin. I hope everyone appreciated our abstract art piece in that previous slide. Yeah, so going off of that land use map, so the X factor, the greenway corridors that we're proposing, we call it the X factor because it'd be two kind of greenways that intersect like an X. So you'd have one going northeast to southeast along the ravine, the river there. And then the other one would be going northwest, southwest, mostly parallel to the 407. And it could even go all the way southwest to connect to that potential biodome park that was proposed in the 2040 vision. So you could create you know, a complete pathway all along both directions. A big reason why we proposed this is because we noticed there was a lot of green space around this area that was not interconnected or seemed to be neglected and unused. And so the main way we propose kind of building up this green space is through remediating land as it's redeveloped. So as you get away from industrial use and you start redeveloping or changing the land use, we could ideally bake in the requirements to expand that green space until you created the desired amount of space for the greenways. On that top right is a picture from Scarborough, actually, of a greenway they have, which kind of just gives you a thumbnail idea of kind of like the scale of what we would be proposing here. Additionally, because there's obviously some highways and you have the GO rail tracks, et cetera, major roads, one proposal to keep the greenway continuous across those sections is to build essentially a human version of your wildlife corridors that you see over highways in different countries around the world, so that you'd be able to keep the path going the entire way through and also keeping it green. So it addresses the lack of green space in this area as we redevelop and build up. It connects all these neighborhoods, north, south, east, and west together, and obviously becomes a site for active transportation with walking and biking. Long term, I mean, you're looking at obviously improved community health as more people walk and bike, gives people alternative routes from getting to work and home as it's all one long continuous connected routes. And also from an ecological perspective, flood risk was something that was identified in this area, especially with the river along there. So the extra green space would help absorb that rainwater and provide flood mitigation, and also the extra foliage and whatnot would provide carbon sequestration. The bottom right is just a picture of a mural. So the idea is that along the 407, we would have a barrier so that it would kind of reduce the noise from the highway as the trail goes along there. And so we just thought it'd be cool idea to throw in, you can make that like a giant public artistic mural as well, to make it aesthetically pleasing.
Hi, sorry, just jumping in. We are at the 7-minute mark. So if you can finish your last point, and then I'm gonna pass it on to Brandon. Thank you.
Yeah, you can skip ahead. Shavi, do you wanna take this one?
I'm gonna quickly do this in 30 seconds or like so. What our plan with the housing was we want to provide a mix of both mid residential and high residential. And mid residential, we're focusing on stacked townhouses or townhouses, mainly to support the multi-generational families that are in the community over there, as well as to provide the live-work environment, as well as high residential, but in a way that has street level commercial to support population-based employment. the first 3 or 4 levels to create a business park with office space and then high residential on top of that, and also focusing on affordable housing, purpose-built rental, and having family-sized units for co-housing, as well as multi-generational families, and of course having a lot of sustainable designs that would be in the form of permeable surfaces, EV car charging stations, bike racks, amongst other things. So that was our vision of the area in terms of residents and employment.
Thank you so much, guys. I hate to cut you off because I know you put so much work into this, but we do need to jump to Q&A. Thank you again so much for your presentation. I particularly like the creativity of the X Factor design for your greenway corridors. And I just want to open the floor first to our judges if they have any questions for you, and then if we have time to the other participants.
Brandon, I had a question for the group, if that's okay.
Please.
So excellent presentation. Clearly a lot of work went into it. I'm curious about the X Factor and the Greenway corridors. How did you decide their delineation? Did you connect, and I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar. I've read the background, but I'm not very familiar with the area. Are they existing green spaces that you have connected, or were they delineated in another fashion?
They were existing green spaces, and there were also like soccer fields and existing green spaces. However, like in the images that we saw, we couldn't see a clear connectivity on north and south of Steeles Avenues, and that's why we're proposing like maybe a bridge connectivity.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's not all, a lot of it's not like officially designated green space per se. It's a lot of it's along industrial sites at this point. And so if you change the use up or found ways to expand that green space is how we would ultimately achieve that connectivity.
Okay, great. Thank you. I didn't have any additional questions. Brandon, I don't know if any of the other judges did.
Thanks, Sabrina. Does anyone else have questions from our judging panel?
So I just want to make sure everyone can hear me before I actually ask. Yeah, we can't hear me? Okay, sorry guys, I'm on the phone. I'm having a bandwidth issue. Great presentation. I really liked, you guys were really starting to get into some of the social and economic issues that Brampton definitely faces. So I can tell that you guys have a solid understanding of the context, which is really good, and a lot of the issues that face Brampton. I guess one of the things that maybe I didn't hear it, or you did go over it and I just wasn't paying enough attention, but you guys described the transition between the existing stable residential to the north and how you planned on transitioning to the higher densities. But what was your plan to transition for the east and west, recognizing that those areas would still likely remain industrial?
So we looked at that. We didn't, because it was sort of outside of the 800 meters, we didn't exactly include it on the map, but we did consider how having office areas on the east and west sides could sort of create a visual buffer for the residential areas, and then sort of step down towards the industrial areas in the east and the west, to sort of, so that there's not like a hard line of residential and industrial, and then maybe commercial or light industrial uses in there as well, just to sort of create sort of an even transition.
Very cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. You did a great job. Thank you for going first. I know that's always difficult.
Thanks.
Up next, we have Team 2, which is, I don't see their team name on there. But Team 2, we're ready for you when you are.
Yeah, awesome. Hi. So I just forgot, how is this controlled? Do I forward slides, or is that something you guys do? I'm on my phone right now, so I don't know if I have the full suite of access as I would if I was on a desktop.
Hey, Lucas, it's Joanne. You can just give me a prompt and I will go through the slides for you.
Okay, thanks, Joanne.
No problem. Can everyone see the screen? Just wanted to confirm. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so our vision, for Brampton Go, centered around increasing access to transit and increasing population density in the area. If you go next. So we see a major transformation happening in this space over the next several decades, from a largely industrial logistics space to a more complete community and innovative centric sort of space, with residential mixed use and office buildings. Since this is a designated area that the province has put aside as an economic zone or an employment zone, we would like to very much intensify the employment opportunities that exist, especially to leverage the growing tech and innovation sector. We also really wanted to emphasize connecting green spaces and creating a more livable community than what's there right now, because right now it's not much of a community at all. Next, please. So when we examined the needs of the community as it stands right now, we need to improve health outcomes because Brampton and the surrounding area often has lower than average health outcomes and higher risks of heart disease. So again, we wanted to stress access to active transportation and green spaces to help facilitate that, along with accommodation to accommodate the expected increase in population. And we want to transition from a single column economy, just this logistics-based warehouse sort of industry, to a more diverse, economical, innovative-based region. We looked at the opportunities. We saw that there was already a major transit hub there that we could expand and build on. The expected population increase would bring more like money and business into the area, so we could increase foot traffic and start opening local businesses. We wanted to expand on the existing green spaces and enhance what was already there. Next, thanks. So we kind of divided this up along the lines of Steeles and Bramalea, as you can see there, into four sort of quadrants. These quadrants are not distinct, separate per se, but just to help us kind of conceptualize what areas we're talking about at any given time. If you could go ahead to slide 6, please. Yeah, one more. So in terms of landscape and the environment, the area of green space, the amount of green space in the area is fairly minimal. Aside from a small park here and a small park there wasn't a lot of space to get out in nature, which makes sense given what the area is currently used for. But one of our big goals would be to build on and connect green spaces, especially a corridor along the left-hand side that would create pathway trails for hiking, walking, and biking, as well as interconnected bike paths and bike lanes on Steeles and Bramalea to help connect different areas and the Go Transit Hub. Next, please. This is sort of a conceptual idea of what we had in mind. It's more conceptual, not concrete, but the idea is there's this big green corridor on the left side, and then there would be interconnections between the 4 zones that we talked about earlier. And of course, the Go station itself, which is where a lot of the traffic would be coming into or coming out of. We really wanted to take a people-centric approach to this, so we wanted to make sure that the active transportation was really baked into every part of this plan, including, as I already mentioned, bike lanes on Steeles and on Bramalea, and also a bunch of bike lanes on the smaller streets and bike paths to connect the green spaces in each quadrant. Next, please. This is sort of a breakdown of what we were hoping to put in each section. So at the top of the graph, you can see the blue residential areas starting from, that's actually incorrect, that should be 6 to 12 floors to kind of blend in with the existing residential neighborhoods that were there and kind of make it a smoother transition for residents, say, that already live in this neighborhood to come into the recreational and the green space zones that this redesign will help facilitate. So they can kind of feel like they're not walking through office space, they're just coming into more of their neighborhood. The green space on the left-hand side, as you can see, would be one of the connecting corridors that would connect people right to the Go station. The office towers would replace some of the existing logistical office, logistics-based and heavy trucking industry that is there right now, with again, which would attract more innovative and would attract more innovation and businesses and industry to this Waterloo-Toronto corridor. Next, please. And yeah, so again, as I mentioned, just office, residential, and mixed use proposed building heights. To help you give an idea of what those would look like. If you go to the next slide. So mid and high rise residential buildings would attract hopefully a lot more families and young professionals to the area, which would create strong economic growth and I think a very nice community in the area, which would help to fill out and use the recreational spaces, the central community hub, and some of the green spaces that we're hoping to build in the area. New buildings will support the population, and as employment increases and as residential population densities increase, more buildings can be built up on a scalable basis. Next, thanks. The transit connectivity is already quite strong in this area, thankfully. And with the goal of this being one of Brampton's 5 town centers, the top priority is going to be to increase inter and intra-regional transit, both connecting other cities like Toronto or Waterloo, but also other spots in Brampton and the surrounding area via the GO Bus and Zoom and Brampton transit lines. We also recommended modifying Steeles and Bramley to have dedicated bus and HOV lanes to help the influx of people move around, especially more quickly, both by community transportation, public transportation, and by carpooling, which would help to address road congestion and environmental impacts from tailpipes. Next, please. The last thing I want to touch on would be the redesigned Transit Hub. The Transit Hub is already a great public space because it is a place where a lot of people will have to walk through to get to buses, bike shares, and trains. And so if we can redesign this a bit to make it more accessible and public friendly, that would be great. So I've got to go to the next slide, please. Got a brief mock-up of what this would look like. Currently is one giant parking lot.
I hate to cut you off. So we are at time. So if you want to conclude your final remark, please.
Yeah, if you go to the next slide really quick, please. Thank you. This is a mock-up of what it would look like. The large parking lot would be taken away and just replaced with a 6-story parking garage. The extra space would become more green space and community space to help invite community to come and use this space, not just as a transit point, but as a meeting and gathering point as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job, guys. I particularly appreciated the focus on active transportation. I think that's really important, and I appreciated that aspect of your presentation. I just want to open the floor quickly to our judges first for Q&A, and then again open the floor to our participants. To our panel, do we have any questions for Team 2?
I had a question, Brandon.
Please.
So great job again. The team I thought did a fantastic job. What I really liked was that you walked us through your thought process with the vision statement and the needs and opportunities. You kind of gave us a sense for how you arrived at your recommended land use plan. But there was an area in red identified as recreation right in the center of your land use plan. And what was that? I didn't catch you sort of speaking to that. What did that represent?
Yeah, great question. So that would be a big community hub kind of on both sides of Bramley. I think that picture might have made it look like it was kind of bisecting Bramley. It would just be on either side. And so what that would be a mixed community space where there would be outdoor green space, public art and art installation space. So both a stage for live performances, but also a public art gallery, an outdoor art gallery, and places like studios and class space for community hubs or communities to kind of come gather. It'd be like a third space, if you like.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. I had another question. Sorry, do you mind if I just jump in?
Please.
Really great. I find it really interesting because a lot of the work that we've done on this site in the past has really focused on the north side of the rail line, and I find it really interesting that, you know, with fresh eyes, you guys, both groups so far, have thought about this more holistically and looked at it from what's happening south of the rail line as well. So I think that's really kudos to you guys. I noticed that you have a mixed use block on the south side.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what you guys envision for the mixed use block that wouldn't be necessarily on the north side.
Yeah, sure. So we decided based on the location of that, and given that we wanted to keep some of the logistics space intact, that would be a lower priority for us. But our vision for that, as it progressed, would be to potentially use it as more office, or not office space, my mistake, as more residential space with shops on the bottom floor.
Mm-hmm.
A sort of idea I had would be like, if you're familiar with the York campus, this might be a little specific of a reference, but there's a York Lanes, a bunch of shops, sort of an indoor mall on the bottom idea with, and then we would have residential units on top of that. And this would be really nice because it would not only be really close to the major transit hub, but also provide residents perhaps some essential stores like a pharmacy, a grocery store, access to services like that.
Great. Cool.
Thanks, guys. Excellent job. Next up is team 3.
I think, sorry, someone had their hand up. Jackson, or was that an old hand up? Sorry, there's just one more. Oh, you might be on mute if you're speaking.
Unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to keep moving along. Just
sure.
Team 3, we are ready when you are. If you wanna go for it.
Hey everyone, so welcome to our Flower City vision. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so our vision statement, it's to enhance the connectivity, livability, and prosperity of the Bramlea GO Station area by meeting the growing housing demands, attracting tech innovation, increasing open green space, and highlighting the historical roots of the area and honoring local indigenous culture. So this is the vision statement for the project overall. Next slide, please. We found it very important to highlight 3 points of interest within our project. We titled them as New Spring Square, Petal Park, Tech Garden, and using the GO train as one of the anchor for the community, we decided to put the green space and the commercial as frontage to the Highway 407, just so the residential up north has a little transition within the neighborhoods. And we also incorporated pockets of green space all around in the project to enhance livability and quality of life for the residents and those who are visiting. Next slide, please. So talking about our point of interest number 1, so New Spring Square. So this would be the area where you would see the iconic library, pedestrian-only walkways, green space, and open space meeting area. And this is the north of the train tracks and the west of Bramlea Road. Next slide, please. So icons. We, taking into consideration Brampton's history, we thought that this flower library could become a landmark, encourage people to visit, learn about the long-standing history of Brampton. And we know that there's a lack of libraries in Brampton, so this could be another anchor of the project, providing a space for community services and such. Next slide, please. So mixed-use housing. Using precedents from both Canada and the States to create live-in workspaces, having medium and high density, which is around 6 to 10 stories or 13 to 16. Within the projects, we found it important to take into account affordable housing. This would be an opportunity to lease the land for 99 years, and that can provide affordable housing below average rent and rent geared to income. Next slide, please. So these would be some precedents incorporating some green space, cream roofs, and also the picture on the left indicates is the one from social housing from France. I thought it would be beautiful to incorporate it within the project. And then we we found it really important to have active transportation, providing bike lanes. With this picture in the beginning, I believe it's from Montreal, having sidewalks as well as bike lanes. And I believe we're going to go into the point of interest number 2. Sakib?
Hello, everybody. So I'm Sakib. I'm going to be going into a bit of detail into our vision for the pedal park. To the left of this slide, you have our features and our landmarks. To the right, you have our overall vision for what we envision this entire community to look like. So to meet our vision for the Flower City, we decided to take inspiration from the Corktown model, which incorporates dense wetland, playground, open and leisure space within a contained zone next to residential housing and GO train railway. Here, the parks function as open corridors which link together neighboring communities and are designed to observe nature but not harm it with the use of walkways. To access these spaces, we decided there would be a mix of bridges and underground passageways which would connect communities and park spaces together with the GO transit station. You can go over to the next slide. So this is the example of Corktown model. Our idea here is to establish new heritage sites and honor past heritage, including indigenous land rights, through not only a greenhouse to landmark the Flower City, but also through using the underground network as an opportunity to consult and employ the indigenous community to place murals and works of art which honors their history and tradition. Can you move forward? Sebastian, I think that's you.
Awesome. So this area will also have a cultural space, which we've taken inspiration from Toronto in terms of using sort of industrial design and container ships to provide some artist space. And we can go to the next slide from there. Our third and final point of interest is the tech garden, which will provide office spaces to the area. It's just east of Bramley Road and north of the train tracks, and is currently sort of a warehouse area which will be redeveloped. And you can go to the next slide, please. So for this design, we'll be featuring high-rise apartment buildings that have a round fluid design that will contrast with older office building designs in Brampton and the GTA. In the bottom right, this area will also feature transitional office spaces, which you can see, where warehouse spaces have been repurposed into temporary offices as the high rises get built. This area is designed to encourage industries to attract industries such as art and design studios, professional industries, law firms, finance, and as well as tech. We'll also feature mixed development, where the first floor is commercial shops and the upper floors are office space. You can go to the next slide, please. The building designs will largely feature atriums that have allow for natural lighting and airflow, and outdoor spaces for lunch breaks and relaxation. And the next slide, please. And within the tech garden, we also envision a revitalized brewery of an old warehouse space. This here is an example from Toronto, where the space is designed to attract professionals and other people from the neighborhood to come and have a space to socialize within the tech garden. And next slide is just a thank you. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And right on schedule, too. Getting good at this. Thank you, guys. I particularly liked how you incorporated the City of Brampton's Flower City tagline into your vision. So I want to open the floor now to our panel of judges if they have any questions for you.
Yeah, I have one, Brandon. Yeah, so first, thanks. That was great. I really liked the precedent visuals were really helpful as a guide to your concepts. My question is very specific, I guess. What's the underground network? I'm not familiar with that. I think that's in reference to your pedal park. Can you explain that a bit more?
Right. So what we found was that there are a lot of fragmented green space, which was, there were sort of islands that were created as a result of the infrastructure, particularly the highway network and the manufacturing or the warehouse in between. So we wanted a way to access these spaces without interrupting or disturbing some of the industrial and commercial zones. And this idea also is a way of linking together communities to these parks through this underground network. And it's mainly pedestrian.
And so are you thinking like literally tunnels?
Basically, yeah. It's
okay.
There would be tunnels, yeah.
Okay. So like a path type system, like.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. No, thanks. That's yeah, that's helpful.
So I had a question, guys. It's Anand speaking. First of all, I just want to commend you. There's clearly a lot of work and effort that went into you. You really demonstrated a pretty comprehensive knowledge of the context and individual planning knowledge, which I think we all appreciate. My question for you is, you guys very comprehensively designed the area, but I did notice on the land use plan that you guys had identified the station area as a parking lot. Can you elaborate on what your specific vision is for the station and whether it is in fact to be a parking lot?
I can go. So that was primarily to keep the parking that's at the station right now. We do understand that not to pave it over, but that there will still be a need for people to drive to get to that area. And then it also serves for parking to use some of the local amenities as like the park. And that's why we kept the parking on the other side as well of the train tracks.
If we can maybe quickly go to slide 3, if there's a chance, it'll show the 2 parking areas, one just north of the train tracks and one just south. And so they're designed to allow people to both access the park who need vehicle access, as well as drop off passengers at the GO station. So they're on both sides of the track there, but the GO station itself would remain where it is, if that answered your question.
I might have just gone a little overzealous with the gray there.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Great job.
No problem.
Up next, we have Team 4.
Team 4 ready?
We're ready when you guys are.
Just give me a prompt when you want me to move the slides.
All right. Let's get started then. Thank you, everyone. Next slide, please. Thank you for joining us today. Next. This is our logo. As you can see, our initials emphasize our attitude towards active transportation. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. This is Brampton within the context of the GTHA. Next, please. This is our team. Next, please. And this is the site we decide to focus on specifically. Next, please. Liam.
This is our division, so Brampton Innovation Hub. Next, please. So implications, we have to solve various issues: increasing exercise and walkability for health, mandatory inclusion housing, adaptive reuse of heritage properties, creation of mixed-use development and centers, increased transit accessibility, and increased economic activity. We'll talk about this more in detail later. Next, please.
So this is our map of vision here. Basically, we wanted to keep it consistent with the Innovation Hub, as it's going to be part of the Waterloo-Toronto corridor. But we also wanted to blend it in nicely with the existing low density residential to the north. So we would have are somewhat dense townhouse residential to the north. And then as we get closer to the GO station itself, we have mixed use office and retail at 6 to 8 floors. And then we have our higher rise 12 to 14 story office buildings around the major intersection of Steeles and Bramalea. Next slide, please.
Sorry, please note the concentration of high rises at the intersection and the way the buildings decrease in height, as well as the setback on the major street to accommodate a better public realm for things like protected bike lanes and enhanced tree canopy. Next, please.
So we wanted to just include our growth forecast numbers here, just as it is the second highest growth rate amongst Canada's 25 largest cities. That is why we focused on not only just an innovation hub for employment, but also to take advantage of that extra space and to add residential in a somewhat dense manner. Next slide, please. And also, this is just a slide to go over the policy context and the different documents we used in designing our vision. So the Brampton Grow Green Environmental Master Plan and the Brampton Eco Park Strategy. We just wanted to take into account Brampton's vision and kind of align it with our interest in our vision. Next slide, please. So these are the different examples of visions and concepts that we used in our own vision. So the Innisfail Orbit Land Use Plan. One that I want to note is the Vaughan Metropolitan Center. So that's definitely one that we focused on in terms of office parks, and we'll get into the park space later, but these are just a few of the examples that we used in our design. Next slide, please.
Great, so these are some of the opportunities. So create an innovative hub for the Toronto-Waterloo corridor, contribute to an urban form that scales residential and commercial space, headway reductions, green space networks are all important. Next slide, please. So these are the constraints. So potential spread of COVID-19 is definitely one of them. NIMBYism is 100% another one. Existing industrial realtors is also an issue. And then heritage space and what we do with that. Next slide, please.
So we just want to demonstrate our themes and kind of break them down for you. Next slide, please. So transportation networks. I kind of figured that there was existing green space, it just wasn't connected in a way. So in your teal, you'll see in the image here, you'll see that that is a bike path with also a walking path beside it to wrap kind of around the whole area. The red is protected bike lanes and signaled bike lanes just for safety, as Steeles is kind of a busy street. And then blue, we have our existing Zoom bus lane. Next slide, please.
So I'm just going to go very quickly just through some precedents that we based our ideas off of. So this one is a large one that we use. This one's located in LA. As you can see, it's kind of a little bit difficult to see, but there is the train, and they provided a bike and walking path with, they also provided public art in this, right next to the railway corridor. Next, please. So we just wanted to make sure we incorporated that active transportation and pedestrian infrastructure near the railway. Next, please. And this is another precedent for that, which is the King High Line Rail to Trail project in Toronto, just to incorporate 100% that walking access next to the rail. Next, please.
So I just wanted to break down the parks environmental open space. So I think interesting dynamic or feature of our plan is that we want the office parks, so your 12 to 14 story office space, but at the base of it to have parks. So basically to add to that connectivity. So in the center here is where there was park space that was missing, but this way we can mix both in and connect it to the existing park space all around. And I wanted to note that the geothermal field, energy field seems to be emerging as a best practice. So we would use that in our office parks. Next slide.
Quickly going to go through the next few precedents for this theme. This is a space in Germany that is in an industrial area that provides an inner circle park, which is integrated in the industrial area and protects the park from highway sounds, etc. Next, please. And this is an example of Innisfail's orbit land use plan. So you can see there's a corridor for walking along the railway line. Next, please.
So here again, you can see the massing with the context. Can you please go to the next slide? So here we actually have a heritage structure as identified by the Brampton Heritage Board. It is the former Simmons Mattress Factory. And what we've decided to do is take an adaptive reuse approach and put in its place a community center, an innovation hub above, as well as retail space along one of the sides to help animate the streetscape. So this is right in the heart of the new center. Next, please.
Okay, yeah, just to finish off, this is a few more precedents. If you could just click to the next slide. And the next one, thank you. And then one more, thank you so much. So this is just quickly my last note. This is just an example of how we can incorporate lofts and townhomes to kind of create an easing of height transition to the single family housing to high rise. And this is just an example based in Newmarket. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Great job. I liked a lot about your presentation. One thing is the logo that I do want to mention. That's really great. The creativity for that, and particularly the other thing I want to mention is the adaptive reuse. I really liked that. So I want to open the floor to our panel of judges for any questions that they might have for you.
Yeah, I had one, Brandon. So yeah, thanks again. Really good presentation. You mentioned COVID, which so it got me thinking, because when I look at your land use plan, you've got office uses clustered around the intersection of Brownlee and Steeles. I was wondering if you had thought at all about, as opposed to having different land uses that transition out to the sort of more the residential industrial areas, why not, and I'm just posing this as a question to you, did you consider just mixed uses that transition in height because of the uncertainty about, the office market in particular?
So I apologize, I should have been more specific. If you look at the legend on the map, it is actually designated as mixed use mid-rise construction.
Okay.
So I apologize about that.
That's right.
Point out another precaution about COVID. I talked about the setback of buildings. The increase in setback would facilitate things like wider sidewalks to make social distancing a bit more easier, because that's a challenge that a lot of the City of Toronto streets have had, that it's very difficult to have a 2-meter buffer between people.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Hey, it's Andrea. I thought that was really comprehensive, and I thought the narrative built really well, and I really loved your use of precedent examples to document and justify why you did what you did. Something that I thought the land use concept was compelling. I was wondering, did you guys give any thought about how maybe a tighter network of streets might overlay or build out over time within the sites more comprehensively on the 4 quadrants? Did you guys give that any thought at all?
So street network was something that I was definitely thinking about when I was placing the buildings in, especially because streets have to be scaled appropriately, and you don't want a street that's too wide. The width of the street should be contextual to the height of the building. Unfortunately, with the time constraints, I didn't have enough time to figure out exactly where I'd want the future streets to go, but those buildings were placed with rough spacing to accommodate additional streets to connect through those buildings.
Awesome, good.
I had a quick question. Again, great presentation. I enjoyed the use of precedents. I did notice this just because community engagement is a lot of what I do, that there was an assumption that there would be NIMBYism in reaction to your plan. Did you want to speak to that a little bit? Why you've made that assumption, or why you assumed that there would be NIMBYism?
I'd like to allow someone else in my group to comment or answer this question.
Sure.
I think.
Sorry. Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead.
I think, yeah, maybe that's something we could definitely reevaluate. I think it seems to be a common theme, especially when you're faced with residential up against a mass construction or an innovation hub. So changing straight to, you know, like your high rise, that's why we kind of tried to blend it into, you know, mitigate the NIMBYism kind of issues. So I think that's something that we could offer there.
Perhaps it was a bit too pessimistic of us. You know, like I think we did try to integrate a lot of great elements, like the community center at the heart of it to help mitigate that. But I guess we were just trying to anticipate any potential issues.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Great job. Last but not least is Team 5.
Okay, Team 5, when you're ready, just prompt me to move.
Okay. I think we're having a microphone issue. Hang on. Yep, Bria's going to call in. Her mic isn't working for some reason.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry.
Does Bria have the call-in information, or does she need us to give that to her?
I think she just said in the chat that she can call in. I don't know. I'll text her.
Hi, is everyone able to hear me?
Yeah, we hear you, Bria.
My apologies. I'm not sure what's going on with my computer, but I'm ready to start. So our team is myself, Allison, Marlon, and Maggie, and this is our proposal for the Bramley Go station. Next slide, please. So just to contextualize, Brampton is a highly racialized mixed income community that requires consideration for inclusive planning and group participation, as well as barriers to community building. Next slide, please.
And so some of the opportunities that we came up with for the site, it's situated within the existing industrial business corridor. So it's already a place where businesses and employment converge and centralize. It's extremely close to the airport, and there is an opportunity to leverage the local position within the region to attract businesses. And because it's a town center, it can have supposedly lower rents, which we would think could also attract businesses and local jobs. And there's an opportunity for growth because there's so many focused policies that give this flexibility to plan for intensification of office space and expansion of transit. Next slide, please. And so some of the constraints are its industrial legacy, so there aren't many parks or green spaces, possible contamination of the soil, and its land use legacy. So there's this high order street pattern, limited multimodal infrastructure options, limited connectivity locally. The existing housing is separated from the site, and the existing housing is low density and low rise. We also thought about COVID and office space. So we're focusing on service sector employment, but how much office space is going to be needed. And currently this area is more of a hub and less of a destination. It's kind of disconnected. It's home to all these logistics centers and warehouses and low-rise industrial. So how do we transition this area from what is there to what we want to be there? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Sorry. And so what we want to be there, we envision this area as a vibrant mix of uses: schools, stores, community hub, restaurants, park spaces, active transportation options with green spaces and connections to and from the neighborhood. And so, you know, despite this question about offices, we'd still like to keep this center cluster of office towers to create a focal point and entry point into the town center. But the office space is envisioned as flexible with opportunities for micro offices and collaborative spaces. The towers are also, they create this gateway. And from this point, the densities decrease and the heights decrease as you move out into a mix of office and retail and residential. So it's a more intense use of the existing land for employment per the official plan, but maintains a low-rise industrial section as well to facilitate the existing buildings. And all the heights following the secondary plan recommendations of between 4 and 12 stories. And so we also propose a cultural hub space just north of the GO station where the community can gather and collaborate together and integrate per the 2040 vision plan, those 3 lenses of public engagement, design, and collaboration. And the hub will offer necessary services for community members and space to engage. And one more space to note is the institutional center, which is really the focal point of the technology and services employment transition. So we picture this as a research and development space for university collaborations, aerospace research linked to the airport, etc. And how do we get there? Next slide.
So the next part is kind of we envision a phased development of the project. If there's going to be development here, we want it to be phased. That way, you know, we can sustain local employment, reduce impacts on the flow of traffic, and smooth the transition of land uses over time. And this kind of could build excitement for the community of new things to come, and it can accommodate some new population growth and bring in new jobs. Next slide. So our transportation plan, we identified some goals, which would be multimodal transportation. So what this would be is to kind of delineate and reduce conflicts between different modes of transportation. So trucks, transit, pedestrians, and cyclists. And we really want to focus on connectivity in the area. So higher order transit is also something that we really valued in order to improve the mobility of logistics and people and to reduce traffic congestion. Next, please. So these are some of the major connections in the area. We have Bramley City Center, Shoppers World to the east, Mississauga South, Pearson Airport to the south, Toronto to the southeast, and Waterloo to the northeast. These are kind of the major connections that we're looking at going forward for this development.
And so we really want to see sustainable design. Community forums should be compact, walkable, gradation of residential densities, and taller buildings can transition down using terracing and step backs at the east and parts of the site which are adjacent to the residential, and frontages to respect the streets and the street scale. And we'd also like to see affordable housing considerations, so mixed tenures, subsidized units, below market value, co-ops if possible, spread out and scattered sites, along with considerations for families and young people, considering the age demographics of the area. But we also want to include supportive housing for vulnerable members of the community. So the intent is to provide a range of housing types for different economic situations and integration between age and income groups. Next slide.
Okay, so we wanted to make sure that we were within the Brampton 2040 vision for our green spaces, which emphasizes sustainable urban green spaces, placing importance on the interconnectedness of those green spaces, which allow for recreational, passive recreational opportunities. We felt that it was important for the mixed-use residential areas to have connected green space, as these can also act as passageways to other neighborhoods. And the Brampton Green Grow Plan emphasizes creating new green spaces as these increase civic pride and act as carbon and heat sinks. Trees and other vegetation planted in those green spaces should be native to Southern Ontario, such as sugar maples, honey locust, and sumac. Okay, sorry, next please.
So livability is one of the pillars. So we were looking for mixed use, close proximity, community spaces. Next, please.
Marlon, I will mention that we are at 7 minutes, so if you can wrap up.
Yeah, we're just going to the last couple and it'll be done in a second.
Thank
So
you.
then the next one is health. So diabetes and heart disease. So we kind of wanted to create more passive activities for exercise and address a lot of different health outcomes for people living in Brampton. Next. And then just diversity, and not just diversity in the sense of people, but in the sense of land uses and access to employment and institutional partnerships to kind of diversify the opportunities for people in Brampton. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Great job. I particularly like that you put thought into reducing conflicts between the various modes of transportation. I think that's important everywhere, but particularly important in an area like Brampton. So I just want to open the floor one last time to our judges for Q&A.
Yeah, I'll jump in. First, thanks. That was great. I really like that your context was really helpful. Mentioning the airport, I think is really important. And also, I really like that you thought about how the area will change over time. I think that's key because obviously it's a big change by the, in terms of the 2050 vision. There's on one of your land use maps, there's sort of a brown area. I guess it's on the southeast corner of Brownlee and Steeles. I missed what that was. I think it's kind of, the legend was cut off on the bottom of my screen. I just wanted to be clear on what that area was. I'm not sure what slide that was.
I think it's slide 5, if you could go back to it. It's industrial, like low-rise industrial, sort of the similar forms to what's there now. And the thought in the phasing and just in the future of this site is those uses might still remain and they might be there during that transition. So we thought maybe just grouping them together where they can really have great access to the highway and to the train corridor without impacting the residential neighborhoods as much.
Great, thank you.
Do we have any other questions from our panel of judges, or can we open it up to the students if they have any questions?
I just wanted to say I thought it was really good, and I really liked the interdisciplinary land use, the land use plan, the transportation plan, the parks plan, and how you layered that type of thinking. And I thought what was also interesting was how you identified the constraint for COVID. And I mean, that's a huge struggle that I think we're dealing with on all of our planning fronts about how some of these trend lines and our forecasts are expected to change over time. So I thought that was excellent, very timely.
I agree, Andrea. I would just add that I really like the consideration for the broader context that you presented, as well as connectivity to destinations. I thought that was well presented. Great job.
I think we have time for one last question. Do we have any questions from the students? If you do have a question, I'd ask that you use the raise your hand feature, which you can find in the participants tab. Jackson, do you have a question?
Yes, I did.
Our timer just went, so if you can make it really quick, that'd be awesome.
Yes, I did, sorry. I wanted to say that it's very good presentation for all groups. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
We can.
Okay, so it was really, really good. And what I wanted to say is that I didn't see any connection between the GO transit from regional to regional. I didn't see that. So it was only Brampton epicenter and nothing else above that. There's a group which did that, but there was not really comprehensive connection between the regional GO transit, right? The Metrolink is trying to do now from Waterloo, from Brampton to Waterloo, from Guelph to York, I live in Guam and I work in AO. So
thank you so much for your question. Does anyone from Team 5 want to speak to that really quickly?
Yeah, I did the transportation, so I guess I'll field that question. We kind of like on our map, I had the idea that we would connect the local transit with Go Transit better because the Zoom currently stops at the corner. So we decided that we would actually want to integrate the the bus terminal to include the Zoom buses in order to bring that kind of traffic inward towards the rail. That way we could have better connectivity, because right now people are walking through the parking lot at like a long distance, walking through like parking lot traffic. So that's kind of how we wanted to address the connectivity issue with local to regional. So that's kind of our plan, but we are limited for time, so we could only say so much.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that limitation of time is definitely a real challenge of a case competition like this. And I just want to say that you, Team 5 and all the teams did a fantastic job today working with the time constraints and working in a virtual environment. There's definitely lots of challenges, and on behalf of MYPAC, I think all of you guys did a fantastic job. So now we're going to take a break to give the judges time to deliberate and to determine who our third, second, and first place teams are today. So I'm going to ask you to come back in 10 minutes at 5:10, please.
We thought that at this crucial moment that if his microphone cuts out again, we'll be crushed. Okay, so for third place, the judges were discussing how we appreciated the visuals of the presentation, the mention of Indigenous culture, we thought was important and well presented. So for third place is going to group 3, Flower City Vision. So congrats, guys. For the second place prize, we thought that this group showed a good demonstration of the broader region and area. They created a destination. There was good thoughts towards connectivity. The context was good, along with some phasing, and we appreciated the parks aspect in it as well. So that's going to group 5, is in second place for their Bramley Go. And then for the first place, we thought that this group had really strong individual roles in their presentations. It was well researched. There was some nod to the heritage property there, and so we decided that group 4 should win first place. So congrats, guys. What else is weird on Zoom? Perfect, Sabrina's clapping, thank you. So congratulations to all the teams. We hope that you really found this case competition helpful. And I'm going to turn it over to Brandon. I believe you still have some things to say here.
Yeah, Louisa, are you on the call?
Yes, I am in the call.
Welcome. Do you want to go ahead, and then I have a few thank yous to give out.
I just want to thank all the groups and participants. I know that all the students worked really hard. And just so you know, we have a lot of first-year students who've been in the program for 5 weeks, and it's amazing how much they demonstrated their knowledge and were able to work collaboratively with other students they had not yet worked with. So thank you and congratulations to all the participants for putting all the energy and hard work that you put into this. I also want to thank our amazing judges, of course. Thank you for volunteering and for bringing for offering the case, but also for volunteering the time to support the program. Sabrina, Coletti, David McMillan, Andrea Oliveira, and Anne Valbram, thank you so much for your time and all the effort in putting together this case and in judging the case. Patty and Brandon and MYPAC, thank you so much. Patty and Brandon have been working on this since probably late spring. Is the first time that we do this with the additional challenge of doing it through Zoom. So thank you so much. I think this is really a fantastic experiential learning opportunity for students. And thank you for providing that. And finally, thank you to Joanne Hui and Jennifer Ferdinand, who've been supporting the whole process throughout and facilitating all the technology. So thank you, everyone. So that's the sort of the general thank you and congratulations to all the students. Well done, excellent work. And yeah, I'm gonna turn it now to Patty.
So I just want to thank again participants and judges and invite you guys to follow us on social media. Brandon, do you want to speak to the COVID relief?
Yes, so to thank our judges in a little bit of a monetary way, we want to recognize your support and donating your time to us. And in your honor, we have made a donation to York's Emergency COVID-19 Student Relief Fund. Thank you so much for your time and for all your efforts to making today possible.
Thank you.
On that note, I do, on behalf of MYPAC, I want to say a few thank yous as well. First to Louisa, thank you for all that you've done, helping to recruit students and to organize the teams. Thank you for that. A huge thank you needs to go to Jennifer and Joanne for doing a fantastic job behind the scenes, organizing the logistics of this event. It is quite difficult to do this over Zoom, and they've been a huge help, so thank you to them. Again, to our judges, Anand, Andrea, David, and Sabrina, thank you for being so generous with your time. To our alumni that are on the call, thank you for joining us and for sharing your support. To your co-host today and to the co-organizer of this event, a huge thank you needs to go to Patty for all the hard work you've done over the last few months on this. And certainly, last but certainly not least, to you, to the students, thank you for signing up. Thank you for participating. I'm mindful that it is your reading week. And I really hope on behalf of MYPAC that you've got a lot out of this experience and that you've enjoyed today.
Yeah, and you can let us know how we did, and we're going to be sending out a survey on SurveyMonkey tonight, and we're going to remind you tomorrow to do it, so look for that. And I think with that, we can conclude the event. Joanne, is there anything else? I think we're good.
I think we're good to go. I just put the survey link in the chat box if you would like to submit your responses and feedback, and we will remind again tomorrow. But thank you all.
Yeah, great. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the rainy day.